My wife got up at 5 this morning, went running, and I stayed in bed. I woke up at 8, and she hadn't awakened me when she got home and showered and went to work at 7. At least I thought that's what had happened.
Despite massive search efforts, her body wasn't discovered for nearly 2.5 months.
Losing Lori has been the worst thing that's ever happened to me. You never get over it. I'm not over it now. I will never get over it.
When a young woman went missing during a morning jog, the story quickly dominated headlines, becoming one of Salt Lake City's most high-profile disappearances. But as investigators searched for Lori Hacking, what they uncovered went far beyond a missing person case. Beneath the surface lay a web of lies and a double life that no one saw coming. Hello and welcome back to our channel, where we shed light on mysterious cases from across the globe. If you still haven't subscribed to our channel, please hit the subscribe button and press the notification bell below. Now let's dive right into this mystery without any further explanation. On the morning of July 19, 2004, 28-year-old Mark Hacking woke up later than planned and noticed his wife, Lori, wasn't home. Lori, a stockbroker assistant at Wells Fargo, typically began her mornings with a run through Memory Grove in Salt Lake City, Utah. That day, she was supposed to return home, get ready, and have Mark drive her to work by 7 a.m. When Mark saw Lori's car wasn't in its usual spot, he assumed she had driven herself to work. However, a call to Lori's office around 10 a.m. revealed she had never arrived. That's when Mark realized her work clothes were still laid out at home, untouched. He immediately called 911 to report her missing, only to be told that he would need to wait 24 hours. Not willing to sit idly by, Mark headed to Memory Grove to search for Lori. He found her car parked near her usual running spot. The vehicle appeared undisturbed, but there was no sign of Lori anywhere nearby. Her disappearance was now as puzzling as it was alarming. Born on December 31, 1976, Lori Hacking was adopted as a child and raised by loving parents. After her parents' divorce, Lori moved to Salt Lake City with her mother, where she excelled academically and socially. It was here, during her time at Orem High School, that she met Mark Hacking. Mark and Lori's relationship began as a classic high school romance. They attended dances, spent time with each other's families, and quickly became inseparable. Mark was a helpful presence in Lori's home, often assisting with errands for her mother. Their puppy love turned into a lifelong commitment when the couple married on August 7, 1999, in Bountiful, Utah. Lori was known for her bright personality, ambition, and strong family ties. She had an infectious optimism and a reputation for lighting up every room she entered. By all accounts, Lori and Mark seemed like a couple on the verge of fulfilling their dreams. Their marriage lasted for 5 years before the day of her disappearance. The day her husband called the Salt Lake City police to inform them that Lori was missing after she left for an early morning jog and later failed to show up to work. Soon, Lori's co-workers, alarmed by her absence, joined the search for her and called police to report her missing. Lori's family and friends scoured her usual running route in Memory Grove, desperately hoping to find a clue. When officers arrived, Mark described his morning in detail, explaining how he'd already run Lori's usual path to search for her. His wet shoes were evidence of his efforts to cross the creek in the area, but despite his distraught demeanor, questions lingered. Salt Lake City, still reeling from the Elizabeth Smart kidnapping just 2 years earlier, launched a large-scale investigation into Lori's disappearance. K-9 units and helicopters were deployed, combing the park and its surroundings. Flyers were distributed across the city, showing Lori's face and pleading for information. However, as the hours turned into days, investigators faced more questions than answers. Witnesses reported conflicting details. A neighbor claimed Lori's car had been parked in front of her apartment at 7 a.m., well after Mark said she had left for her run. The discrepancy added a layer of confusion to an already unsettling case. As the hours stretched into an agonizing day, the most chilling theory began to take hold. Lori might have been kidnapped while jogging. The idea seemed plausible. Memory Grove, though a serene and popular running spot, had its hidden corners and blind spots, making it a perfect place for a potential predator to strike unnoticed. Adding to the sense of urgency was the fact that Lori's disappearance wasn't just a personal tragedy, but a community-wide shockwave. Just 2 years earlier, Salt Lake City had endured the harrowing kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart, a 14-year-old abducted from her own bedroom. That case was fresh in everyone's minds, and it heightened the fear that another nightmare could be unfolding. The kidnapping theory grew even more plausible when paired with the devastating timing of Lori's disappearance. Lori and Mark seemed to be on the cusp of their dreams coming true. The couple, married for 5 years, had spent their relationship supporting one another's ambitions. Mark had recently celebrated his graduation with a master's degree in psychology from the University of Utah and was preparing for their big move to North Carolina. According to Mark, he had been accepted to the prestigious University of North Carolina Chapel Hill Medical School to study oncology, a step toward fulfilling his aspiration to follow in his father's footsteps as a doctor. Lori, always supportive of Mark's goals, had even resigned from her job and postponed her plans for an MBA to focus on his schooling. Friends described their apartment as nearly packed up, with boxes stacked neatly and labeled for the move. 3 days before Lori's disappearance, the couple had hosted a farewell party at a picturesque mountain cabin owned by Lori's boss. Friends and family recalled Lori's vibrant smile and excitement about the new chapter ahead. But beneath the surface of their seemingly happy life, Lori was carrying a secret. She was 5 weeks pregnant. Her loved ones described her as ecstatic about becoming a mother, eagerly anticipating the changes the baby would bring. Despite the hope and optimism surrounding their future, the sudden, unexplainable nature of Lori's disappearance cast a long shadow over the couple's plans. As flyers with Lori's face were posted around the city, investigators worked tirelessly to follow every lead. Could someone have been watching Lori that morning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? Complicating the investigation were eyewitness accounts from a neighbor. According to the neighbor, Lori's car had been parked in front of their apartment at 7 a.m., and it remained there when she left her house again at 8:30 a.m. Contradicting Mark's claim that Lori had left for her run and driven to Memory Grove. This raised troubling questions. Was it possible Lori had returned home after her jog? If so, why had she vanished again? Investigators turned to Mark for answers, hoping he could clear up the discrepancy. But Mark's explanations didn't settle the matter. Instead, they deepened the mystery. He insisted that Lori's car was gone when he woke up and that he found it parked at Memory Grove later that morning. If Mark's account was accurate, then how could the neighbor have seen Lori's car at home during the same time frame? As is common in cases like this, suspicion began to fall on Mark. Statistically, spouses are often among the first people questioned in a disappearance. Yet those close to Lori and Mark found it difficult to imagine any motive for foul play. Mark's behavior seemed to align with that of a distraught husband. He was emotional when speaking to police and struggled to hold himself together long enough to relay the events of the morning. Lori's co-workers, who were close to the couple, described their relationship as happy and supportive. One even recalled Mark sending Lori flowers at work just days before her disappearance. Lori's mother echoed this sentiment, describing their marriage as strong, with Lori affectionately referring to Mark as her big old teddy bear. Still, there was one odd detail that investigators couldn't ignore. On the morning Lori and Mark went out to buy a new mattress for their bed. While strange, given the couple was about to move, it wasn't immediately alarming. But as the hours passed and more questions emerged, the decision to purchase the mattress began to take on a darker significance. Had Lori been abducted while running, as so many feared? Or was her disappearance tied to something closer to home? As the search for answers continued, one thing became clear. The story was far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. On the day Lori was reported missing, Mark Hacking accompanied officers to the police station for an interview. Calm but visibly strained, he repeated the story he had told earlier. Lori had left for her morning jog and never returned. He also told how she bought a new mattress on the same day.
Okay, so you took the mattress home in your car,
On top of my car.
on top of your car. Did you tie it down or anything? Or what'd you tie it down with?
Twine.
Do you know where the twine's at now? Do you know what happened to it?
It should be in my dumpster.
Okay. Okay, what happened after you got the mattress home?
I put it on my bed. I was putting sheets on. Called my wife while I was putting sheets on.
Then, investigators found it curious when Mark refused to cooperate with the next step.
Okay, let me explain the test to you. You understand it so you feel comfortable with it, and so you won't be afraid of it.
Okay.
What this is a truth verification machine. Okay? Have you ever had a lie detector test, the old-fashioned type? If you've seen them on TV, okay, they have like the box and they have all the arms going around, the papers rolling, the guy's sitting in the chair and he's all strapped up and all that stuff. Okay? That was developed in the 1930s. Okay? We're hoping technology's advanced a little more since then, and that's what this is. Okay? Before we get going, we need to take care of some items of business here. How you spell your last name?
Hackking.
Okay. This is just waiver form. It's basically saying you're taking this of your own free will. Nobody's forcing you or coercing you or anything of that nature.
Okay.
Okay, you can agree with that. If you can agree with that, just sign that there.
Okay. I do feel coerced into taking this.
And how do you feel? I mean, let me explain this to you. Nobody's making you take this test. If you don't want to, you can walk right out that door. Right
And
now.
what happens to me?
You walk out the door and they take you back up to your car.
Okay. And if I refuse, of course that makes me look guilty.
It's not admissible in court anyway.
I don't think I want to take it.
Okay.
To follow up, police decided to take a closer look at the couple's apartment and to examine the dumpster in the parking lot outside. There, Mark, joined by one of his brothers, watched as officers inspected the contents. When his brother asked what the police were looking for, Mark replied, "Apparently, they're nervous that I bought a new mattress," adding cryptically, "I just need to get away." The search yielded no significant evidence at the time, but the oddity of Mark's behavior lingered in the minds of investigators. And as the hours passed, his actions grew even more erratic. In the early hours of July 20th, just one day after Lori's disappearance, police were called to a hotel less than a mile from the couple's apartment. Mark had checked into the hotel instead of staying at home and was now causing a disturbance. Officers arrived to find Mark running through the halls completely naked, except for a pair of sandals. His behavior alarmed hotel staff, and Mark's brother Scott was called to the scene. When Scott arrived, he found Mark's handheld PDA, a device that now carried a deeply unsettling message. To everyone from Mark, "This is justice. I'm so sorry." Concerned for his brother's mental state, Scott and the family decided to admit Mark to a psychiatric unit. However, investigators weren't convinced by the apparent breakdown. FBI profiler Candace DeLong later commented, "He kept his sandals on. That's not generally something we see in someone truly psychotic." This observation fueled suspicions that Mark was faking mental instability to divert attention from himself. As investigators continued their work, it became increasingly clear why he might want to distract them. Mark Hacking's carefully constructed life was nothing more than a house of cards. Actually, he had many secrets, and they were all about to be uncovered. Mark Hacking had been living a double life. Mark Hacking had spent years cultivating the image of a hardworking student and a devoted husband. To everyone around him, he seemed deeply invested in building a successful future for himself and Lori. Textbooks were often scattered across the apartment, notes were scribbled in margins, and research papers sat in stacks, tangible proof of his dedication to his studies. On more than one occasion, Lori's mother even helped Mark write term papers, believing she was supporting his pursuit of a medical career. But the truth behind Mark's academic life was nothing short of astonishing. Despite claiming to have been accepted into the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill's prestigious medical program, Mark had never even applied to medical school. In fact, he hadn't graduated from the University of Utah and had dropped out years earlier without completing a degree. Mark's deception wasn't limited to academics. He created an entire persona to maintain his lies, convincing both his and Lori's families of his ambitions. To make his story believable, Mark fabricated details about attending medical school interviews, even going as far as traveling out of state for fake meetings. When he was supposedly at classes or studying for exams, Mark was often seen loitering at a nearby store, drinking soda, eating hot dogs, and smoking. Employees at the store later reported that Mark claimed to be a therapist. He even asked them to keep his smoking habit a secret from Lori, as it was forbidden by their faith as members of the Church of Latter-day Saints. Mark's job at the University of Utah's Neuropsychiatric Institute was another layer of his elaborate ruse. He told Lori's mother he worked as a therapist conducting sessions with patients. In reality, Mark was employed as a healthcare assistant and elderly, facilitating group activities rather than providing therapeutic care. Adding to the oddities, Mark often wore a name tag at work that read Franz, a nickname inspired by a Saturday Night Live skit about narcissistic bodybuilders. To his colleagues, it was just another quirky detail. To investigators, it underscored the extent to which Mark had constructed an entire life based on lies. As news of Mark's lies broke, both families were left in shock. His father, a respected pediatrician, and his brothers, a doctor and an electrical engineer, struggled to reconcile the truth with the Mark they thought they knew. "We didn't see it coming," Mark's father admitted to the press. "We got completely blindsided by it." The community began to speculate about why Mark had gone to such lengths. Some believed he felt overwhelming pressure to measure up to his family's success. In an interview, Mark described his lies as a little snowball that got out of control. But the scale of his deception suggested something far more calculated. Lori's family, though devastated, initially stood by Mark, believing in his innocence regarding her disappearance. But investigators were unconvinced, especially when they unearthed troubling new details about the days leading up to Lori's disappearance. Surveillance footage showed that Lori was last seen alive on Sunday evening, the day before she vanished. The couple appeared normal and composed at a convenience store. However, later that night, Mark returned to the store alone at 1:30 a.m., purchasing cigarettes. His explanation? Lori had gone to bed, and he wanted a moment to himself. What struck investigators as suspicious was not just his late-night outing, but the mounting evidence surrounding the couple's bedroom. On the morning Lori went missing, Mark had purchased a new mattress, a decision that seemed oddly timed given their impending move. The search for the old mattress led investigators to a dumpster at Mark's church, where they discovered the discarded item. The top portion of the mattress had been cut away, leaving a glaring question. Why? Mark claimed the mattress was thrown out because Lori had bled on it during her menstrual cycle. Yet this explanation failed to account for the missing section or why the mattress was disposed of at the church instead of their apartment complex. It was clear that Mark's timeline of events was crumbling, and investigators were closing in.
My wife got up at 5 this morning, went running, and I stayed in bed. I woke up at 8, and she hadn't awakened me when she got home and showered and went to work at 7. At least I thought that's what had happened. Most of the time I drive her to work, and she wakes me up when she's ready and I take her to work, but sometimes she drives. And today she was driving, so when I woke up and she was gone, I just figured she hadn't awakened me, just let me sleep. And so I got up at 8, did some things. I played my Nintendo a bit, and we needed a new mattress. We decided to get one, so I went And we had been shopping around, looking at different places, and I had found one.
What time was that?
I left my place at about 9. Drove around. Most of the places were closed where I was looking, but one place said on the door that they would open at 10, but I got
What
there.
place was that, you know?
I can't remember the name, but it's right next to R.C. Lilly.
As Mark's web of lies began to unravel, investigators turned their focus to the couple's apartment and Lori's car, hoping to uncover clues that could break the case wide open. Lori's car, found parked near Memory Grove, where she was believed to have gone running, quickly became a focal point. Investigators noted that the driver's seat and mirrors had been adjusted for someone much taller than Lori, who stood just 5 feet and 3 inches, and weighed around 115 pounds. This detail strongly suggested that Lori hadn't been the last person to drive the vehicle. More troubling still, a blood transfer stain was discovered in the back seat. These stains occur when wet blood from one object transfers onto another, further indicating foul play. Meanwhile, a closer look at the couple's apartment uncovered additional alarming evidence. Lori's purse, keys, and wallet, items she would have taken with her, were all found home. This suggested that Lori might never have left for her jog in the first place. As investigators combed through the bedroom, they found small but telling spots of blood on the headboard and nightstand. Opening a drawer in the nightstand, they discovered a sheathed knife. Mark, who was present during the search, laughed nervously and explained that the knife was something he'd kept since his days as a scout. However, the officer examining it noted what appeared to be a spot of blood on the blade. With these discoveries mounting, police sought a warrant to conduct a more thorough search of the apartment. Mark was asked to leave while investigators worked. And though he complied, he became a suspect in his wife's disappearance. The evidence was damning, but the timeline of Lori's disappearance was perhaps the most chilling piece of the puzzle. This was the same night that neighbors reported hearing loud arguments coming from the couple's apartment. One neighbor distinctly remembered hearing a woman screaming around midnight, followed by a male voice shouting, "It's all over, and that's it." Mark's behavior the following morning only deepened investigators' suspicions. After Lori supposedly left for her run, Mark purchased a new mattress. This decision, coming on the heels of Lori's disappearance, struck investigators suspicious. Why would someone replace a mattress on the very day their spouse went missing? The search for the discarded mattress led police to a dumpster at Mark's church. There, they found the old mattress, but not in its entirety. The top portion had been cut out and was missing entirely. When questioned, Mark provided an explanation. He and Lori had decided to throw it out because she had bled on it during her menstrual cycle. But the investigators weren't convinced. Why use the church dumpster instead of the one at their apartment? And why cut away the top of the mattress? The answers remained elusive, but the discovery further undermined Mark's credibility. As evidence against Mark mounted, investigators pieced together a chilling theory. Blood on the mattress and gaps in Mark's timeline painted a grim picture. Lori's purse, keys, and wallet left behind raised questions. Why leave essentials for a jog? Combined with bloodstains, it was clear something terrible had occurred in the apartment. Mark's purchase of a new mattress, seemingly to obscure the old one's fate, suggested a cover-up. Without Lori's body, definitive proof remained elusive. Still, even more disturbing secrets awaited discovery. Everything unraveled on July 24, 2004, 5 days after Lori vanished. It was then that Mark Hacking's father and brothers confronted him directly about what had happened. The weight of mounting evidence and his crumbling web of lies left Mark with nowhere to hide. To their shock, Mark admitted what no one wanted to believe. He had killed Lori. This revelation shattered the hopes of family, friends, and volunteers who had been tirelessly searching for Lori. Shortly after Mark's confession, one of Lori's relatives spoke publicly, urging search efforts to cease as the devastating truth had finally emerged. Why Mark decided to come clean at that moment remains unclear, but it's likely that with so many of his other lies exposed, he realized the truth would surface eventually. According to Mark, the events leading to Lori's tragic death began on the evening of July 18th. The couple had an explosive argument after Lori confronted Mark about his double life. Lori had uncovered the depth of his deceit just days earlier, and the discovery left her devastated. On Friday, July 16th, 3 days before her disappearance, Lori's colleague said that she'd left the workplace in tears. Determined to uncover the truth, Lori had contacted the financial aid office at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, to make arrangements for Mark, only to be told by a school administrator that there was no record of his enrollment. Horrified, Lori pressed further. The administrator placed her on hold and contacted the American Medical College Application Service, which confirmed that Mark hadn't even applied to the university. It was a moment that shattered the foundation of trust in their marriage. Lori was so shaken by the revelation that she left work early that day. Yet, despite the emotional toll, she still attended their going-away party with Mark that evening, maintaining appearances as though nothing was amiss. Why did Lori go through with the party? Perhaps because Mark had already offered her another lie to placate her. He told Lori that he had spoken to the university administrator himself, and that the issue was merely a clerical error, a mix-up in the incoming student list. Lori, still hoping for clarity, called the school again and left a voicemail to confirm the correction, stating that she just needed reassurance for her own peace of mind. That voicemail would not be heard until Monday, July 19, the day Lori was reported missing. Even in her message, Lori's doubts were evident. While she claimed she trusted her husband, her words hinted at her growing skepticism. The reason for Lori's skepticism may have been because this wasn't the first time she'd caught Mark in a lie. Years earlier, in 2000, Lori had confided in a friend about another incident. Mark had told her he was enrolled in college for a semester, only for Lori to later discover it wasn't true. Though she had forgiven him at the time, the seed of mistrust had been planted. By July 18th, the pieces were falling into place, and Lori must have realized the scope of Mark's deception. The confrontation that evening became heated, with neighbors later reporting loud voices from the couple's apartment. Around midnight, a neighbor heard Lori screaming, followed by Mark shouting. Mark claimed that Lori eventually went to bed, but the tension lingered. As she slept, Mark stewed in the weight of his lies and the fear of being exposed. In the early hours of July 19th, he retrieved a .22 caliber rifle from their belongings, entered the bedroom, and shot Lori in the head. The cold and calculated nature of what happened next stunned investigators. Mark systematically disposed of evidence, wrapping Lori's body and the bloodied portion of their mattress in garbage bags. He then scattered them in different dumpsters across Salt Lake City, believing it would be enough to obscure his crime. Surveillance footage captured a critical clue in the early hours of July 19th. At 1:30 a.m., Mark was seen at a convenience store, alone, without Lori. In the footage, he appears preoccupied, examining his hands and fingernails, possibly checking for blood. Investigators later theorized that Mark might have been disposing of evidence or mentally preparing himself for the next steps in his cover-up. The following morning, Mark put his plan into action. He reported Lori missing, pretending she had gone for her usual morning jog and never returned. He even staged a search, finding her car parked at Memory Grove, untouched and undisturbed. Mark's performance as a distraught husband was convincing enough to draw sympathy from both Lori's family and the community. Despite all his performance, the cracks in Mark's story grew more evident. The discarded mattress, the blood in Lori's car and apartment, and the inconsistencies in his timeline painted a damning picture. When he confessed to his family on July 24th, they immediately informed authorities, marking the beginning of the end for Mark Hacking. Throughout the search, Mark's unnerving calmness persisted. Even after confessing, he showed little emotion, maintaining a detached air. Publicly, he seemed resigned to his fate, but privately he worked to manipulate the narrative. He claimed his actions were the result of overwhelming pressure and the weight of spiraling lies. Mark's lack of remorse only deepened public mistrust. To many, His calmness was a chilling indicator of his calculated nature. Finally, on October 1, 2004, nearly 3 months after Lori's disappearance, searchers uncovered her body in the landfill. The discovery marked the end of a relentless search effort and confirmed what Lori's family had feared since Mark's confession. Lori's remains were in an advanced state of decomposition, making it impossible to determine whether she had been pregnant at the time of her death. This unanswered question added another layer of heartbreak for her loved ones. The recovery of Lori's body provided critical evidence to solidify the case against Mark. Blood and tissue samples matched those found in the couple's apartment and on the discarded mattress, leaving no doubt about what had happened. Mark Hacking's confession pointed investigators to a chilling conclusion. Lori's body had been discarded in a dumpster and was likely buried deep within the Salt Lake County landfill. This revelation launched a grueling search operation that would last months, involving cadaver dogs, heavy machinery, and countless volunteers. The Salt Lake County landfill spanned acres, with thousands of tons of compacted garbage added daily. Authorities were tasked with sifting through layers of waste to find any trace of Lori. The conditions were brutal: intense summer heat, overwhelming odors, and the ever-present risk of illness or injury. Yet the searchers pressed on, driven by the hope of bringing closure to Lori's family. For weeks, no trace of Lori could be found. The vast expanse of garbage, combined with the decomposition of organic material, made the task seem insurmountable. Still, investigators refused to give up. They meticulously traced the garbage routes to narrow down the likely location of the dumpster where Mark had disposed of Lori's body. Mark Hacking's actions and behavior suggest he may have suffered from narcissistic personality disorder, a condition marked by charm and a seemingly wonderful persona that often conceals a much darker reality. These individuals thrive on admiration and self-importance, but when confronted or challenged, their facade begins to crack. Confrontation often triggers rage, as they cannot tolerate anyone questioning their version of reality. Common traits of narcissistic personality disorder include grandiosity, an inflated sense of self-worth, and an unwavering belief that they are unique or superior. They crave constant admiration and recognition, often fantasizing about unlimited success, power, or ideal love. Perhaps most chillingly, they exhibit a profound lack of empathy, failing to recognize or care about the emotions and needs of others. The senseless nature of Lori's death left everyone asking one haunting question: why? Yes, she had confronted Mark about his lies, but her family firmly believed that forgiveness would not have been beyond her. Lori's brother once said, he didn't have to be a doctor, a president, whatever it was. As long as he was doing his best, she would have loved him. After Lori's death, a typed note was found in the couple's spare bedroom. It is believed to have been written by Lori, though it's unclear when. The letter hinted at the strain their relationship was under and her deep desire for change. In it, Lori wrote, "I want to grow old with you, but I can't do it under these conditions. I can't imagine life with you if things don't change." This note offered a possible motive for Mark's horrific actions. Was it the fear of losing Lori that drove him to commit such a brutal act? Was he desperate to prevent her from walking away if he couldn't maintain the illusion of the life he had built through lies? Dr. Kathy Yates, a forensic psychologist, weighed in on Mark's behavior, shedding light on his seemingly pathological lying. As he grew up and was watching other family members get successful or be successful, he was not, Yates explained. There's an element of grandiosity. He felt like he deserved more than he was getting in life, but he didn't want to put his energies into achieving the kinds of goals that he probably could have achieved. On suspicion of aggravated murder. Following the discovery of Lori's body, he was sentenced to 6 years to life in prison. For many, this sentence seemed shockingly lenient, especially given the brutality of the crime. However, at the time, Utah's sentencing guidelines for aggravated murder allowed for this punishment. Public outcry over Mark's sentence led to significant changes. The Utah Board of Pardons and Parole re-evaluated his eligibility for release, ultimately deciding that he would not be eligible for parole until 2035. Additionally, the state revised its sentencing guidelines, increasing the minimum sentence for aggravated murder to 15 years to life. This change became known as Lori's Law, named in her honor. Lori's father also took steps to honor her legacy by having her maiden name, Suarez, placed on her headstone, symbolizing the independence and life she built before Mark's betrayal. Even behind bars, Mark's behavior continued to shock and disgust the public. He was caught signing and sending autographs to a site that specialized in murder memorabilia, a grotesque industry that profits off the notoriety of killers. After the incident became public, Mark agreed to stop, but his fascination with self-promotion didn't end there. Mark reportedly began writing his autobiography. While in prison, though the manuscript has yet to be published. Mark's actions and the circumstances surrounding Lori's murder suggest a deeply complex and distorted view of love. It's difficult to say that Mark genuinely loved Lori in the way most people define love. His decision to kill her was driven not by love, but by fear, pride, and an inability to cope with the consequences of his own deceit. This tragic case serves as a haunting reminder of how unchecked narcissism and a refusal to face the truth can lead to devastating consequences. The case of Mark and Lori Hacking leaves behind a haunting series of questions. Was Mark ever truly capable of loving Lori, or was his affection always tied to the role she played in upholding his facade? What drives a person to such extremes to protect a web of lies? Was it fear, desperation, or a chilling lack of empathy that led Mark to take Lori's life? And finally, what does this case teach us about the masks people wear, even with those closest to them? How well do we ever truly know the people we trust with our hearts and our lives? Every tragedy carries lessons, if only we choose to listen. The question now is, will we? What do you think about the case? Please let us know. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.